The world of Dolmenwood is one of adventure and peril, set in a fairy tale realm of wonder, horror, whimsy, magic, and mystery. True to its name, Dolmenwood is a land of standing stones and monoliths, obelisks, of many shapes and sizes. To the citizens of the wood, they are objects of mystery and wonder, but to those who know the truth, they are much, much more. Certain of the standing stones of Dolmenwood mark out ley lines, arcane channels that sustain the life of the land itself. Several of these channels, the lines Yuir, Lam, and Hode, converge beneath Dolmenwood, and are responsible for many of the strange events, magical and arcane, that occur within the forest. However, there is a fourth ley line, quite different from the other three: the Witching Ring, Winter's End, Chell. This ring, delineated by the 6 summer stones, runs in a wide circle from the borders of the wood in the west to the eastern side of Lake Longmere, the region known as the Dwelmferg. This circular ring, Chell, is of a different nature to the 3 ley lines of the wood. Where those are natural and formed from the very essence of the world itself, Chell is a wonder of magical artifice. The drun, masters of the occult secrets of magic, created the ring as a great seal, a barrier against the cold prince and the fairy kingdom of Phrygia. Upon the forging of the Triple Compact, the Ring of Chell sprang into being, completely severing the king of Phrygia, the cold prince, from Dolmenwood. To create the ring, the drun siphoned magical energy from the ley line Yuir at the nodal known as the Peliorans, the 3 sisters. These 3 stones serve as the hinge upon which the gate that bars the cold prince hangs. The energy from Yuir is then channeled into a circle of obelisks, the summer stones. Each of these 6 stones serves as a ward. Each anchors the otherwise unstable ring in place. Each summer stone, Rodith, Uruzur, Sigil, Oil, Hadruil, and Droth, is guarded by one of the Audruns, powerful drun magicians that in some cases have forsaken their corporeal forms to better protect the stones. Powerful magic further protects them, for there are many who would seek to destroy these stones or use them for their own purposes, neither outcome acceptable to the drun. While today the forest is lush, fertile, and full of strange and varied life, it was not always so. In ages past, the fairy lord, known as the Cold Prince, ruler of the realm of Phrygia, looked upon Dolmenwood and found it to be a fine domain. With no one to oppose him, the Cold Prince laid down his claim and brought an age-long frost to the wood. Snow blanketed the forest year-round, all things locked in an eternal winter. The few mortals who inhabited the wood, a handful of humans and the goat-like bregle, served the Cold Prince in fear and trembling. From his seat of Hoarfrost Keep on the shores of Lake Longmere, the Cold Prince held an icy, cruel court. But winter cannot last forever. After a reign of nearly 500 years, the Cold Prince's interest in Dolmenwood began to wane. His other domains were vast, including his home realm of Phrygia, where he returned to his ice palace of Rubenaeth. As his interest waned, so too did the frost which blanketed the wood. Nature began to creep back into Dolmenwood, and the cycle of seasons returned. Only the Dwelmferg remained frozen, a remnant of his now token claims to the wood. With the recession of winter came the powers of the mortal realm, the drun masters of the arcane, the king of the Brackenwalders laying claim to the lands of the eastern wood, and the pluritine church, voice and visible arm of the one true god. These factions rose and fell alongside the native bregles, who without the Cold Prince had settled throughout the high wold of western Dolmenwood. Then, after an absence of nearly 1,000 years, the Cold Prince returned. His roving mind, ever working, had turned once more to his neglected and half-abandoned realm of Dolmenwood. Seeing mortals trespassing on land of his own possession, laying claim to what had been his undisputed dominion, sent him into a wild rage. Many mortals died in the ensuing blast of winter that blew before his armies. The mortals resisted. The human king led his army against the frost-clad forces of the Cold Prince. The chroniclers simply state that the mortals suffered great losses in this first battle. In desperation, king and bishop turned to those whose arcane power rivaled even that of the Cold Prince himself. the drun. They formed the alliance known as the Triple Compact: Church, Drun, and King, Faith, Will, and the Sword. With arcane rites and secrets long lost, the drun constructed the Witching Ring, banishing the cold prince and his ilk from Dolmenwood, exiling him to his home of Phrygia, and lifting the eternal winter that had endured in the Dwelmfurg since time immemorial. Though the wood is a place of growth and life, there are some parts where shadows grow thicker than others. In the darkest of these, within the depths of the Nagwood, dwells a fearsome creature, a living embodiment of chaos. Atanaway, the nine-legged, Ol Shub, the Nag Lord. While sages, those few who even know of such things, disagree on the origins of this creature, it is generally agreed upon that it arrived in the wood some 400 years ago. Drawn to the magic inherent in the wood, Atanaway found the realm a place rife with opportunities for depravity, madness, and horrific absurdity. Fun, as Atanaway would consider it. Taking a liking to the northern portion of the wood, the creature attacked and seized the Sarg Stone, a nexus point of two ley lines. The Audrun which had been defending the stone was quickly dispatched, and the power of the stone subjugated. With its court now prepared, Atanaway sent out a call, an invisible summons, which echoed in the minds of all creatures of chaos throughout the wood and beyond. A ghastly menagerie of beings, some fair, some foul, all vile and wicked, answered the call. The bregles of the northern wood were utterly subjugated. Those who proved more amenable were corrupted and remade into the foul crookhorns. Atanaway took particular delight in breaking the minds and virtue of those bregles who resisted the most fiercely. Nor did Atanaway's presence remain contained. The very presence of the creature poisoned the waters of the Shub, one of the many tributaries to the great Lake Longmere. Within the confines of the lake, the water dragon Gelok was infected, forced into a dream-racked torpor, from which there seemed no escape. Mortals came to know Atanaway as the Nag Lord, and associated him with early folk tales and superstitions. Early in its rule in the north of the wood, the beast begat offspring. 18 unholy abominations birthed from the foul harridans, mortal women corrupted by Atanaway to be its brides and servants. These 18 offspring are known as the Atacorns. Upon their birth, they roamed forth from the Nag Lord's domain to spread misery and chaos in their wake. Most have left Dolmenwood far behind, but there are those who claim that a few at least still lurk within the wood. Though many beings inhabit the wood that some have called gods, the men of Brackenwald know only one god. The Pluritine Church was founded in a far distant land by 5 prophets: Ogrimund, Hogrish, Eladine, Lacrimide, and Thys. These 5 prophets were granted a vision of the future, of the divine, and the state of all things. The true battle in the cosmos was revealed, as was the truth of the world. There are not many gods, only one. All others are false, or simply aspects of the one true God. Though the prophets lived millennia ago, in a land so far from Dolmenwood that most do not even know its name, the Pluritine Church has spread across the world, bringing with it the prime teachings of the prophets. The one true God must never be depicted or named. All sentient life is sacred and must be protected and nurtured. Evil deeds must be punished, but free will is fundamental. Each individual must be free to choose a life of evil and eternal punishment, or a life of good and eternal reward. Organized into a strict hierarchy, the Church plays an essential role in the ordering and daily life of the mortal folk of Dolmenwood and the kingdoms beyond. Clerics, curates, abbots, bishops, vicars, all form the visible structure of the Church. Wandering friars, only loosely affiliated with the hierarchy, reach even those places far from civilization. Perhaps because of its wild and arcane nature, Dolmenwood has drawn to itself and produced many great saints and heroes. The Church recognizes 100 saints that serve as patrons and examples for the folk of Dolmenwood. These 100 saints are invoked in daily supplication and in times of need. The feasts are celebrated, the vigils kept. Though every saint is important in the life of those who live within the wood, there are some of particular significance. Saint Cygnus, patron of the dead; Saint Sedge, patron of holy warriors; Saint Faxus, patron of those who face evil magic; the 3 martyrs, and many more. But the most important of all is the great Saint Clude, patron of Dolmenwood itself, who sacrificed his own life to rid Dolmenwood of a great evil. In times past, Dolmenwood was filled with roadside shrines and small chapels dedicated to one saint or another. Over the years, these shrines have fallen into obscurity. One by one, the roads fell into disuse, and the shrines which served to mark the pilgrims' ways were lost. Though Dolmenwood was once the domain of the Cold Prince, and though he is now banished from the wood utterly, there are other fairy lords and ladies besides him, who throughout history have settled into the wood, claiming small portions of the forest as extensions of their own kingdoms. Though few of these have remained persistent in their claims, there are a few that are known to inhabit the wood to this day, or at least to claim portions of the wood and enforce those claims in one form or another. Primary among these is the Earl of Yellow, a mirthful ochre-skinned satyr with horns of shimmering ivory and a mane of radiant gold. The Earl rules the realm of Wyforth, and while he seldom visits the mortal world himself, he takes an active interest in the doings of mortal folk in his dominion. It is said that the town of Brackenwald falls within his traditional domain, and the folk of that town maintain odd customs and quaint traditions relating to the time of his rule. Another of the fairy lords known to the folk of the wood is the Duke My Fleur, a wild-spirited fairy said to have been born of a fairy father and a human mother. His crown of holly and ivy is a common feature of folklore and tale, and his dreadful anger and heartening laughter are proverbial throughout the wood. As changeable as the Duke is not a reference to the Duke in Castle Brackenwald. Duke My Fleur is said to rule from Castle Ravenmere, though he is rarely present there. The stories say that the Duke is a prodigious hunter, and his wild hunt has been known to cross over from his fairy realm of Diothernia into Dolmenwood. At that time, all mortals best beware, for to hear the horns of the wild hunt and the baying of its hounds is a dread omen. Perhaps best known to the folk of the High Wold is the great King Pusskin, a spirit who completely abandoned his home realm in fairy and chose to live forever in the mortal world. Like all true fairies who make such a decision, King Pusskin began to fade away. The stories say that he has disappeared almost entirely. It has been noted, though, that the folk of the High Wold are especially kind to cats. There are many other fairy lords and ladies that are spoken of in folk tales. The Goblin King, Lady Belladonna, the Hag Thorn Rosy, the Lady of Midnight, the Lady of Spring Unending, the Duke who cherishes dreams, and Prince Mallowheart, to name a few. The children of Dolmenwood learn many tales of these figures at their mother's knee, though many mortals dismiss such stories as old wives' tales. The wise know better. Among the folk tales and superstitions of the folk of Dolmenwood, perhaps none are older and stronger than those of the witches of the wood. These tales speak of depraved practitioners of human sacrifice, treacherous wielders of hex and illusion, and ministers of potent cures and charms. To the folk of the land, these mortal women have obscure aims and dark intents. It is generally agreed upon that they meet beneath the moon to work magic, and that they gather in secret to worship old entities in the forbidden depths of the wood. Yet little of any certainty is known of them. And yet there are those who have made a study of witches and their secrets. The Church frowns upon such study, except perhaps among the clerics of St. Faxus, who seek out and put an end to practitioners of evil magic and such false worship as the witches are accused of. However, some truth can be gleaned from those who do make such studies. What is known is that the old religion of the folk of the wood before the arrival of the pluritine church was called Gwaire, meaning sacred glade. some of the traditions and folklore practices of the people of the wood can be traced back to Guaire ceremonies and rituals. Those who follow the Guaire mythology worship the so-called wood gods, of whom only the Green Man, the god of feasts, ale, revelry, and hunting, is still remembered in tale and song. However, to this day, the witches of Dolmenwood are said to hold to these old practices and rituals. Witches of the wood worship the gods of the elder days, and while their names are forgotten by almost everyone, there are some who might speak the secret names. Erta, the devouring mother; Hasturiel, thrice crowned; Limeth, the quiet brother; and Imbala of the husk. It is said that the witches of Dolmenwood devote themselves to figures like these old gods, becoming brides, or the eyes of these beings. Of course, there are few who can speak with authority on such subjects, for despite witches being a presence in folklore and myth, such figures, if they exist, are careful and cautious. What is known is that witches have an immense, if sometimes subtle, power. The drun, those seekers after the arcane, are ravenous for the secrets of the witches. And as no males are admitted into the covens of the wood, the witches have managed to hold off the drun thus far. Still, there is often no differentiation made between drun and witch in the eyes of the church, and this has sometimes made for strange alliances and short-term truces between the various practitioners of forbidden magic. Though huge swaths of Dolmenwood are quite wild, the men of Brackenwald lay claim to every mile, as is their way. Enforcing those claims is an entirely different matter. The entirety of Dolmenwood falls within the titular lands of the Duchy of Brackenwald, a vast domain which extends far to the south, east, and west of the wood itself. The seat of the Duke, Castle Brackenwald, is a large city with a permanent population of nearly 10,000 souls nestled against the southern edge of the wood. The current Duke, Thespian III, is a troubled man of 60 years, careworn and tirelessly vigilant in his many duties. While a competent administrator and a just ruler, the Duke lives in the permanent shadow of his father, the great Duke Archibald IV, who died serving the Pluritine Church in its holy wars. His wife, the Duchess Ophelia, their 3 sons and 5 daughters, at least those still living and unmarried, all live alongside an army of servants and knights in the great ducal keep, a lofty white stone structure with countless towers, turrets, and minarets. While the Duke owes fealty to the distant king, his ancestors ruled Dolmenwood in their own right as kings and queens. It is said that there is fairy blood mixed with that of their mortal ancestors from that early time. The greatest vassals of the Duke are the other lords of the wood, both Longhorn and human. These lords rule over parts of Dolmenwood, the high wold of the western wood, and the tidelands to the south. Among these lords, the greatest is the Baron Sagewine Hogwash, a disinterested lord and the ruler of High Hangle, the other great city in the realm. From the dizzyingly tall central tower of Castle Paragon, Baron Hogwash rules the high wold with a loose hand and a looser eye, preferring dances, banquets, and intrigues of the amorous variety to the work of ruling a barony. With innumerable minor lords and ladies scattered about the wood, there are some who do retain positions of importance, either due to the size or position of their estates. Lord Edwin Gwillifer rules from the halls of sleep. Lady Theatrice Harrimore, stern, hard, and pious, commands, or attempts to command, the heart of the wood. Lady Pulsophene Mulbreck oversees the miraculous Falls of Nif, over which much of the trade that passes through Dolmenwood flows. And Lord Harold Nodlock of the southern High Wold serves as the loyal anchor of the Duke's presence in that part of the realm traditionally ruled by the Bregles. Whether his loyalty is truly secure is a matter of quiet debate. The lands of western Dolmenwood are traditionally the home of the bregle, the goat-like mortal folk that have lived in the wood for longer than records have been kept, certainly longer than the humans of Brackenwald. The ancient Longhorn families of the Bregles can trace their lineage back thousands of years, to the time of the Cold Prince's dominion over the wood. Despite this, it is not the bregle lords who hold dominion in the High Wold. When the kingdom of Brackenwald was incorporated into the wider kingdom it now belongs to and became a duchy, the High Wold was attached to it as a barony, under the dominion of a baron swearing fealty to the Duke of Brackenwald. By that time, humans and bregles had lived alongside one another in the High Wold for centuries, and their nobles often intermarried. The human nobles, having closer connections to the eastern kingdom of Brackenwald, were set in power, and the Longhorns fell in line after a period of some disagreement. Longhorns, and indeed most bregles, are fond of tracing out family trees and disputing genealogical claims. Over time, these disputes have developed into bitter feuds and rivalries. Before the incorporation of the High Wold into the Duchy of Brackenwald, blood feuds and vendettas were commonplace. Under the current ruler, Baron Sagewine Hogwash, these conflicts are administered in bloodless ways, though not without considerable pressure and oversight from the Duke of Brackenwald himself. Among the many Longhorns that claim noble titles and ranks, the three greatest are the houses Malbleet, Merkin, and Ramius. Lord Griffius Malbleet is a refined aesthete, a philosopher with a silver tongue. His seat of Redrath Manor was recently granted a much larger domain after a legal technicality and a questionable decision by Baron Hogwash gave him dominion over nearly half of his elder half-brother Lord Ramius's land. For his part, Lord Shadegore Ramius is a temperate, shrewd, and somewhat reclusive lord who has the good opinion of the Duke. He is often seen at court, and has been known to advise his lord on many occasions. The bad blood between him and his half-brother Malbleet is the source of growing concern for the Highwolders. Many sense trouble brewing. The Lord Simeon Merkin is half bregle, half human, and rarely seen in court or elsewhere. Unmarried and heirless, with a reputation for belligerence and frustrated ambition, he rules from the isolated and rather uncomfortable Colstoke Keep in the west of the Highwold. It is said that his cousin, the Lady Borid, expects to claim the keep when Merkin drops dead after one of his fits of anger and cruelty. While most mortals fear Dolmenwood, or see it as a deep mystery best left alone, there are those that feel differently. The drun are a cabal of sorcerers who ages ago discovered the arcane powers of the wood, and have craved that power ever since. In the early days of their appearance, the Cold Prince had turned his eyes away from his domain, and aside from the Dwelmferg, the wood was a place rife with opportunity for those willing to seize it. The drun see the wood as their own domain, and stand as the unchallenged, or nearly unchallenged, masters of the standing stones and ley lines of the forest. The secrets of geomancy are theirs, but there is no form of magic, no domain of arcane power that they do not covet, and to one degree or another, possess. The origin of the drun is lost to time. It is said that they arrived in Dolmenwood from a faraway land, and while human, are of a kindred entirely different to the folk of the Brackenwald and the Tithelands beyond. Their hair is straight and raven black, their complexion ghostly pale, and their voices are clear and strident. Over the ages, the drun have waxed and waned, both in power and appearance. There are times in the history of the wood where they very nearly vanish completely, only to re-emerge 100 years later with full force and power, enforcing their claim to the wood with arcane might. The only thing that the drun hold to be sacred is knowledge. They would gladly sacrifice a mortal life, their own included, to add a single grain of knowledge to the collective store that they hoard. Seek, know, keep, is the drun reed, and it is a code for which they are willing to kill or die. The common folk of the wood refer to the drun as the Watchers of the Wood, or the Hooded Men, for the name they call themselves, the drun, is said to be accursed. The drun dwell within the Dwelmferg, it is said, though small families live all about the wood. Drun wives are said to be keepers of great herbal and alchemical secrets, while the Braithmaids, drun maidens, are known to sing songs of great and potent power. Though the drun are secretive and obscure, there are many among the other groups in the wood, be they witch or bishop, who know of their presence. Indeed, for many, it is not the fearsome Nag Lord or the long-feared never realized return of the cold prince that strikes dread into their hearts, but rather the shrewd, cunning, logical, and heartless quest for arcane power embodied in the drun.